Let's move on to phase 3 of the panel, and Lucy Hoareau from UNESCO will lead off.
Thanks, Ed. Ed has not had to cough up to now, so I'm hoping I will keep up the trend. I just want to say at the offset that that UNESCO is pleased to have been able to confer patronage to this event, and we are very thankful to the organizers for having approached us to be associated in this regard. UNESCO as such has not been directly involved with the microbiome project up to now, but obviously within the last 3 days we have heard many interesting exchanges, and we feel that there is scope for possible collaboration and assistance in one way or another. I will just give you a brief overview of some of our actions and activities and how these might relate to what has been talked about here and the interest areas that you have been talking about. UNESCO, of course, is best known for its education activities and perhaps culture to a large extent, but we do have a fairly substantial activity in the natural sciences and also in the social sciences, and I will bring some of those points on a little bit later. Our main objectives, of course, of the natural science sector in which we belong is, of course, to contribute to developing science capacity building in the natural sciences worldwide, and in particular with an emphasis on developing countries. As you see here, interdisciplinary action, more and more that is being promoted as opposed to perhaps isolated activities in specific areas like hydrology or geology or basic sciences for that matter. Enhancing, of course, the leveraging power of science, collaboration and strengthening science education and that kind of thing. Education for research for sustainable development, very important now, especially with regard to the impending Rio +20 meetings. As we said, we belong to the natural science sector, and the program specifically that we are tied to is the International Basic Sciences Program, and this encapsulates all the activities of UNESCO within the areas of basic research, biology, physics, chemistry, the biotechnology programs, and interdisciplinary action in that regard. So again, strengthening capacities, reinforcing intergovernmental cooperation. I think this is an important part of our activity, and this is perhaps where, to some extent, UNESCO can come in and provide some kind of assistance, or perhaps be of some use in the process, the follow-up to the microbiome project. Our main, of course, leveraging power is with the governments, and we have the very immediate contact with our governmental partners at a very high level, decision makers, and I think this is where UNESCO has its strongest advantages. And of course, we work very much with the South, emphasis on the developing countries, Africa, and promoting South-South, North-South-South collaboration and exchanges. Just to give you a general idea of some of the programs that we might have been involved in, either initiating or involved in some kind of collaborative way. Merson's, which some of you might know, is a very old program, which is unfortunately rather in a very difficult stage right now. Cooperation with the American Society for Microbiology, over 15 years of collaboration in which we have provided lots of support for training mainly, capacity building. Now recently developed this International Educators Program, which is very important for trying to stimulate microbiology activity in developing countries. Of course, the outreach program and others providing first-hand, up-to-date information in research in this regard. Of course, we've also been working with other microbiology institutions, Pasteur, IUMS, and others. We've been involved in some way with the Human Genome Project in the past, historically, of course. A recent collaboration with the Human Variome Project. I might add that this, to some extent, is a comparative to the Human Microbiome Project, in that you know, they are also starting up, and they're doing a lot of research and a lot of international activity in this regard. However, they chose recently to, through the consortium, to establish a formal working relation with UNESCO as an NGO. And I think this is very important because this allows them, in a sense, to have access to UNESCO's decision-making processes, UNESCO's network close link with the member states. And this takes us to the issues that have been brought up here. How do we take this to the developing countries? I think it is important as a follow-up phase to this that you do, in fact, include the developing world as much as you can. And I think UNESCO has that leverage. It has the possibility to interact with, to bring on board some of the partners. I mean, we work with research institutions in the developing world, governments, and these, the governments and decision makers obviously facilitate and pave the way to allow things to happen more easily at the national level. And of course, I mean, this is very important. Very quickly, I'm getting the eye from Ed. Obviously, I have done the dirty deed of going over time. I must quickly talk about the social aspects, of course. We have the three issues here. Scientific integrity, which, of course, I mean, without wishing to point fingers at any particular the industrial representatives that are here, but certainly the commercial pressures and the funding issues come into it, the need to produce data, the need to publish, and the need to secure funding, and commercial, of course, agendas will come into that. Social responsibility, very important. I think we all would agree that science without ethics can sometimes, in many occasions, lead to bad science. And here we have all sorts of issues coming up. Here again, the issue of public benefit. Just quickly to say that scientists will come across all sorts of problems. They will need to deal with these issues. We need to include the public in debate and decision making. And UNESCO can facilitate exchanges and reaching consensus on many controversial issues. And of course, in generating normative instruments to deal with some of these issues. We need also to address the problem of how to make the public more inclusive in the decision-making process when dealing with, for example, the microbiome, especially with regard to personalized medicine. When we project ourselves into the future, we talked about affecting mind changes, perhaps certainly susceptibility to disease and everything else. I think certainly there is a lot of room for us to question, to examine how this can best be done. And UNESCO is always ready to certainly help in whatever way possible.